You know what time it is, no matter where you've been. So let's do it again. Listen up and let the sun shine in. We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
And here's Daniel, Alan, and Joe.
Daniel, we've got a bit of a problem here.
Oh, no.
The Three Musketeers is down to 2 today. As our listener can tell, I am not Alan. Alan has done, I think, every single intro for somewhere around 70 episodes. And I guess you could call it a scheduling conflict. He had something come up that's very important last second. And we're doing this just the dynamic duo today. Unfortunately, it's just the two of us, man.
Yeah, we're gonna miss him. He, I don't know. It's not gonna be the same, but we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, I don't know who I'm gonna pick on for saying Reese cup and things like that. So be on your toes, buddy. We'll see how. I gotta direct
if
this.
Reese cups come up, I'll be ready.
Yeah, I gotta direct this energy towards somebody, and well, you're the only one here. But I guess since we don't have Alan with his little anecdotes to say that entertain us all, I really look forward to the intro every week. He has told us, and maybe this isn't such a big surprise, he doesn't usually have a clue where he's going to go with these intros. It's just we press record, and that good stuff that he has pours out. Right there live.
He be as surprised as we are.
You're right. That's right. So anyhow, we'll hop into it. Today, we're going to take a topic that has caused mass confusion for ages, and I'm hoping that you can shed a little bit of light on some of this and why the masses have been wrong on this topic. So we're going to talk about premillennialism, and that is a mouthful. I got it out the first time. I'm not going to say it again. What do you believe? Daniel, walk us through a little of, first of all, what is that? And second of all, what are some of the implications that has? Because I know folks hold on to that doctrine.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. There are basically 4 different views about the millennium when it comes to historical theology, 4 main views. A lot of this is surrounded text in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 6. And we'll read that in a minute, but where it really stems from is a difference of understanding, what I would say misunderstanding, about what Jesus means when he talks about his kingdom and what the nature of the kingdom is. That was something that back, even his apostles struggled to understand what type of kingdom he was going to establish. They were looking for the Messiah figure to come and reestablish the earthly throne of David, to restore the kingdom of Israel. They wanted him to lead a rebellion against Rome and make Israel this political power that it once was, lead it to new heights of glory that had not been seen since the days of David and Solomon. That's what they really wanted.
And apparently Rome had gotten a little bit of whiff of this too, because that's one thing Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you a king?" As you know, he wasn't worried about a spiritual kingdom. So he was worried about an uprising.
Exactly. And that's the pretense that really they were using to try to solicit Pilate's interest in Jesus. Pilate wasn't going to crucify Jesus just because of religious differences, but they needed to try to convince him that he was a rebel leader. But I'm glad you mentioned Pilate, because in Jesus's exchange with Pilate in John chapter 18, he specifically, when Pilate asked him, "Are you a king?" Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world." If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. John chapter 18, verse 36. So Jesus specifically says, my kingdom is not of this world. That's not what it was intended to be. His is a spiritual kingdom. It's not a political kingdom. And so this is a key reason why I don't think the doctrine of premillennialism is valid. But we've digressed a little bit. I started out telling you about the 4 different views of the millennium, this 1,000-year reign.
Sorry, that's one of my strong points is taking bunny trails. Sorry about that. I don't have Alan to reel me in, so
we need to circle back around to that topic anyway. But to clue the listener in case they aren't familiar with premillennialism, the 4 basic views. The first one is amillennialism, which a means not or without. The 1,000-year reigns in this view is a symbolic reference to the present age when Christ is currently reigning over the church, which is his kingdom, and that there will be one resurrection of all the dead at the end of time, followed by the judgment and the beginning of our eternal existence, either in heaven or in hell. Most members of the churches of Christ today are going to take this belief and think that's the correct understanding of the Bible's teachings about the 1,000 years. There's also a doctrine called post-millennialism. Post-millennialism used to be much more popular than it is today. There's not that many groups that still believe it, but it basically says that Christ will return to the earth after an extended period of time, not necessarily a literal 1,000 years, but an extended period of time of peace and prosperity that was brought about by the preaching of the gospel. And advocates of that view are going to believe that the millennium is going to begin once the world has been fully evangelized. That's going to kick in the millennium. Then you've got premillennialism. There's historical premillennialism, which says Christ is going to reign over the earth for a literal 1,000-year period following his second coming. The saints are going to be resurrected at the beginning of the millennium, the non-believers at the end of the millennium. So they think there's these 2 resurrections separated by 1,000 years, and after that 1,000 years comes the judgment. Then it comes dispensational premillennialism, and this is the one that has become very popular in the world today. When you see these movies and books like the Left Behind series and all this kind of stuff, that really centers around the idea of dispensational premillennialism, and it's almost universally believed among evangelicals, but it's not been historically a widely held belief. It's a fairly modern belief, even though it's widely held today. But it's a much more complicated version of the premillennial theory, and it holds at least 2 resurrections and 3 judgments. It's very, very complicated, and there are considerable differences in how different premillennialists view it. So, we'll kind of take on some broad strokes at it, but there's still one particular denomination or another. It's going to have a different wrinkle, a different approach at it, but we'll look at kind of the rough side of it. But anyway, the idea is that Christ will come in the first phase of his return to the earth. Is what will be called the rapture. And at this time, the righteous dead will be raised, the living saints will be changed, and both will be caught up in the air to meet the Lord. So that's the first resurrection and the rapture. Maybe you've seen the bumper stickers that say, in case of rapture, this car will be driverless or something like that.
Right.
So that's what that's talking about. And now, honestly, there's nothing terribly wrong with the word rapture if you're just talking about being called up to meet Jesus. But in modern context, it's usually associated with this idea that I would disagree with. Now, as we progress into this, as an aside, I want to tell the listener, I don't view this as a matter of salvation. I think you on the realm of the scheme of things that we can agree about on the Bible and disagree about. I think that the premillennial doctrines are wrong, but I don't think that they are necessarily soul condemningly wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I got you. There's things that are salvation issues, things that are not. Baptism being one of those salvation issues.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can misunderstand some things without it being a salvation issue.
But where
Because
I've had problems is we've talked about before. There are different denominations, I guess, different thoughts out there where folks seem to cling to the obscure and, frankly speaking, the weird. And then they completely bypass the things that make sense just to hang out in Revelation. And so this premillennial, see, I told you I would mess it up. I was going to say it once and not say premillennialism. This thought comes mainly from Revelation 20, right?
Right.
I guess what I don't understand is why, of all the imagery that Revelation holds, why suddenly this is something literal to folks. It's obviously very metaphorical and filled with these fantastic images. And then we get here to the 1,000-year reign, and that is a literal thing. They believe Jesus will come back to this earth, reign for 1,000 years. And it goes so far to affect national politics. That's one reason. Now, you're older than I am by like 10 minutes. But maybe you understand back in the 60s, 70s, there was a real big push or was it the 40s, to push Israel into being a nation again. That way Jesus would have a place to come back to rule over. Am I right or am I crazy on that?
No, I think you're historically right. Now, I'm going to be speaking a little bit outside of my
Sure, we're talking geopolitics, but
right. But I do think that you're correct that part of the reason America has historically been interested in Israel having Israel is because of this idea of premillennialism. Now, I'm all for being allied with Israel,
Sure.
but it has nothing to do with this.
As if the Lord needs our military might,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Sorry, I took another aside. Keep going, Daniel. You're doing great.
Sure. Okay, so after this rapture, then comes the marriage feast of the Lamb, during which there's a great tribulation on earth. I have different ideas about how long the tribulation is. But after the wedding, Christ and his bride, the church, will return to earth, where Christ will set up his kingdom. According to this theory, he will sit on David's throne in Jerusalem for a literal 1,000 years. Jews will be converted, and Old Testament worship will be restored. There'll be peace and harmony on the earth for 1,000 years. And at the end of that time, Satan will be loosed for a short time to make a last effort to destroy the Lord's people. And that'll be followed by the resurrection of the wicked and the final judgment. So that's kind of the rough sketch of what premillennialism is. And you're right, it's based on heavily symbolic passages in Revelation. Let's read Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 6, and let the listener, as I read through this, what do you actually hear in this text? Now, some of it is easy to misunderstand. Some of it's hard to deal with, and I grant that. But there's so much about this premillennial theory that just really isn't in there. But before I get into that, I will point out that one of the cool things about Revelation, we were talking about the symbolism, and there are some very different ways to approach Revelation. But all of the mainstream ways that I know to approach Revelation, even though some of them see it being unfolded throughout history, some of them see it entirely kind of theoretical, philosophical, not really rooted in historical events. Some people view it as entirely in the future. Regardless of all the very different ways people look at Revelation, most everybody ends up at the same point, and that is the point of the book is God wins. God wins, and we want to be on his side. And whether we think that that's going to involve this 1,000-year reign, or we think that it's not, whatever, we understand in the end, God wins. He's already won. And that's a message of hope as we move forward into the world and move forward into the future, that the world may get crazy sometimes, but at the end of it all, God's going to win. So we can have peace and comfort in that idea. All right, so the text there in question says, "And I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the keys of the abyss and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the abyss, and shut it, and sealed it over him, so that he should not deceive the nations any longer, until the 1,000 years were completed. After these things he must be released for a short time. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given to them. And I saw souls of those who had been beheaded because of the testimony of Jesus, and because of the word of God, and those who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received the mark upon their forehead and upon their hand. And they came to life, and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. Behold, our blessed and holy is the one who has part in the first resurrection. Over these, the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and will reign with him for 1,000 years. Commentator Ray Summers wrote that if verses 4, 5, and 6 of Revelation 20 had been omitted, no one would have ever dreamed about a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ upon the earth, and him setting up this temporal throne in Jerusalem and inaugurating a millennial reign as an earthly monarch. Yet whole systems of eschatology, theology, and philosophy of history have been constructed on the precarious basis of these highly symbolic verses. And I think he's right in what he says about that. Of course, the Bible only has to say something once for it to be true, but these really highly symbolic verses are not a very steady ground to base a major tenet of doctrine. It's worth noting what's not taught in these verses. It doesn't say anything about the second coming of Christ. It doesn't say anything about a bodily resurrection of the dead. It doesn't say anything about the reign of Christ on earth, or the literal throne of David, Jerusalem, or Palestine. None of that's in there. The conversion of the Jews, the church on earth. If those doctrines don't come from Revelation 20, and they don't come from anywhere else in the Bible, then that begs the question, where do they come from? And so it's important to understand what this passage actually teaches, and we can get into that some as well. But going into it, we want to understand that what we said already, that Jesus' kingdom is already not of this world. Going back to if he wanted to establish an earthly kingdom, back after he fed the 5,000, and they were coming, he perceived, the Bible says in John chapter 6, verse 15, that they were about to come and take him by force and make him king. If somebody wanted to be king, when they're coming to try to force him to be king, seems like a pretty opportune time to take that throne. But he departed at that time and got away from him to be alone. And again, in Mark chapter 9, verse 1, he says, "Assuredly I say to you that there are some standing here who will not taste death till they see the kingdom of God present with power." So if this kingdom is some future reality that's coming at the end of time rather than a present reality, then there's some very, very old people that are hiding out amongst us somewhere. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, this is a very difficult piece of scripture here. Not just do we have Jesus reigning for 1,000 years, But explain this to me. I know we're not doing a study on Revelation. I guess that's probably what we should do next. We haven't done a Revelation episode. We should do one.
Have we not done one at all?
I don't think so. Nope.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we should do that.
About how to read Revelation. We'll brainstorm later.
Mm-hmm.
But explain this to me, Daniel. What's the purpose of Satan being bound and then letting him go? That doesn't make any sense to me.
All right, that's a great question. So again, the symbolism here in this very passage, Satan is not. He's depicted as a dragon. Satan's not literally a dragon, and people debate if he's a fallen angel or something like that. Satan is a spiritual being. He's not literally bound with a great chain. He's not literally shut up in a bottomless pit. And so we shouldn't expect that the time of his binding to necessarily be a literal 1,000 years either. The numbers throughout the book of Revelation are very symbolic in their nature. So Satan's binding does not prohibit him from all activity. He's been described in various passages like John 16:11 as the ruler of this world, and saying there he's already been judged, meaning that he's already condemned. The sentence is sealed with Christ's triumph over death.
That's right.
In Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, says that since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and might deliver those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. So Satan has already been defeated. He was defeated with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Yet his power now is limited. God says that he's in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man, and God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but with the temptation will provide a way of escape also, that you may be able to endure it. So Satan, even though he is powerful, he's now bound. He's limited. He can't overpower us to the point where we cannot resist him. And there are limitations. It's sort of like the idea of a dog on a chain. If you get close enough to that chained up dog, then the dog can bite you.
You're right.
But if you stay out of his reach, he is bound. He has these limitations.
Okay.
Now, this idea of him being released at the end, I don't entirely know really what that's about or what that means.
Well, if you keep reading, he's caught again and thrown in the lake of fire a few verses later.
Exactly.
And so it's confusing why the good guys hold the keys while they would let him out just to recapture later. That's confusing. But I do have another question I want you to clear up right fast. You and I know Revelation is full of figurative speech. Folks that hold to this premillennialist concept, they believe this is literal. How do you show them that that Revelation as a whole is not literal? Because a lot of times the folks that I've talked with and the folks that I've read, they believe all of it's literal. And so where do you start with on that? Maybe this is for our Revelation episode, but we'll revisit that on that one.
Yeah, that can be a longer conversation, but kind of in short, part of it is understanding the nature of apocalyptic literature in general. Apocalyptic literature thrived under Judaism, and it especially thrived in situations where there were periods of persecution, where you had this power that you wanted to be able to write messages, coded messages that you could circulate and distribute within the group of the initiated that would understand. But if these things were intercepted, then they would look like nonsense, and the powers that be wouldn't be able to decipher what was really being discussed here. And the book of Revelation, we believe to be written under a period of significant Roman persecution. And a lot, the way I understand the book of Revelation, is a whole lot of it is about the downfall of the Roman Empire that is going to be referenced heavily throughout the book. And so it makes sense that you're writing in code here, and it reads very much like something that's written in code. That somebody with an understanding of the Old Testament is very rooted in Old Testament symbology. They're going to understand those things, whereas somebody that is a Roman official picking this up, he's going to scratch his head and have no idea what's going on here. And a lot of people today interpret it about the same way as those Roman officials that are scratching their heads and don't have any idea what's really being talked about.
And we also know that while the Bible is divinely inspired and it speaks to us and we can learn from it, we can learn salvation, how to get to heaven, these individual books weren't necessarily written to Joe Pritchard, Daniel Gaines, and Alan Jones. I mean, look at like Ezra and Nehemiah, right? We can learn from those, but those were not originally addressed to us, right? And so when John's writing this, we aren't the original audience. I imagine that original audience, like you're saying, it wouldn't be as confusing to them as it was to us. Or as it could be.
Yeah, I think you're right. Mm-hmm. And with any text like this, there's a primary audience and a secondary audience, and we're always the secondary audience.
You're right.
These books are written with us in mind, but to somebody else more immediately. And some people in their interpretation of Revelation, see, here's the balance. It needs to be relevant to the primary audience and the secondary audience.
Yeah.
And these premillennial views make it entirely irrelevant to the primary audience. What comfort is being brought to these Christians as they face life and death persecution by talking about some type of reign that's going to be thousands of years from now? That's not very comforting. If my family is about to be thrown into the Colosseum to face lions,
You're right. Okay. Well, we've only got just a few short minutes. I still feel, it's like you feel naked without the third person here. It's uncomfortable to me. I miss Big Al.
I do. I do too. Yeah. Wish he was there. Maybe you can record just something later from him and dub it in.
Somewhere,
in there.
Somewhere I've got a recording of Alan singing the Soul Training theme. Maybe I can slide that in here.
maybe something from his Coach O impression. That's always enjoyable.
See our Facebook page, folks, if you want to know more about that. Oh, speaking of Facebook page, please go on there, give us a good review. Also, if you have a beef with it, you don't like the program, just email me and we can talk about that. You don't have to do a review for that. But if you do enjoy it, please review us anywhere you listen to your podcast, on our Facebook page. Give us the 5-star ratings. Tell your friends, whatever. We're still, we're in year 3. This is season 3. I can't believe it, but we're season 3, and I feel like we're still growing. We're still working hard at it. And so if you enjoy this, please share with those that you think would benefit from this program. We would really appreciate it. Daniel, we've got 2 minutes. Is there anything pressing we have to get out in 2 minutes? Anything else you got to burn a hole in your pocket?
One thing I really want to urge people to do as they do study these things is to never interpret difficult text in a way that contradicts plain text. Where the Bible teaches something in a plain, easy to understand way, don't let some convoluted understanding of a symbolic passage, a passage that's hard to understand. The Bible's not going to contradict itself. God's not going to contradict himself. So if something is easy to understand somewhere else and you're understanding a difficult passage in a way that contradicts it, your understanding of the difficult passage needs to be adjusted.
I think that's good advice to end on. We can go ahead. Alan should be rejoining us next time in a couple of weeks, and we'll look forward to that. But other than that, Daniel, go ahead and hit the outro, and I'll get the music started in post, and we'll call it an episode, just the two of us.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, dear listener, for letting us be a part of your spiritual journey today. We are honored by that. We want to thank the elders at the South Green Street Church of Christ for making soul training possible. And hopefully Big Al will be back with us again next time, and we'll be back to normal and not be like a tripod with a missing leg here. Hopefully we don't fall flat.
That's a bipod.
And that's right. Is that even a thing? I've seen the ones that have just one leg, but
I can't imagine it would work very well.
Yeah, I don't think so. All right. Well, until next time, keep soul training.
We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
To learn more, you can email us at soultrainingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can write to us, P.O. Box 503, Glasgow, Kentucky, 42142. That's Soul Training.